Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another custom Thomas Wooden Railway model overview. This next item is an interesting one. It's basically a hybrid of two different types of coaches that have appeared in the Thomas and Friends series over the years. The coaches that you see in front of you are basically a combination of both Emily's coaches from the TV series and the old coaches that were only seen in the first season of Thomas and Friends. And these excellent models were made by Turtles and Thomas. I've provided a link to his channel in both the comments and the description below, so be sure to check his channel out and give him some love for these awesome customs that he's made for me. So when I commissioned Turtles and Thomas to make these coaches, I basically asked him to make a combination of both the old coaches from season 1 and then something that would resemble Emily's coaches that have been seen in both the model series and also the CGI series. So the old coaches don't have very many forms of merchandise because they were only seen in the very first season of Thomas and Friends, which was all the way back in 1984. However, I do have two of the Ertl style of coaches, which the old coaches were modeled after. So these were actually marketed as the old coaches, and I'm just reading basically straight off the wiki that the old coaches were basically kind of the former express coaches, but they've just, gotten older over the years and they aren't as nice as the newer coaches. So they're only used on select trains such as, for the branch line services and all that. So they're basically coaches of the past where they're still in good enough condition to still be used for passenger service, but they're not like the pride of the line or anything like that. So like I said, the old coaches really didn't have many forms of merchandise, but I do have two of the Ertl old coaches. And what's really cool is if you look underneath here, it actually says it's from 1987. So this coach right here is 30 years old, which is pretty crazy. So hopefully if I kind of place it here, you can look at the coaches in the background and you can kind of start to see some similarities. One of the things I noticed when I remember seeing Emily's coaches for the first time, I remember thinking, wow, those look really similar to those old coaches that we saw very early on in the Thomas and Friends series. So that's where my inspiration for this custom kind of came from. However, like most of the other customs I'm going to show you guys, I did very little or absolutely none of the work. It was all done by Turtles and Thomas. So the main difference between this style of coach and the one you see in the background is, for one, the size, because the Ertl models had different sizing, and also this area where the windows are. On this version, you can see it's white because I definitely say these coaches represent or are more representative of Emily's coaches than the old coaches, whereas around the windows here it's more of a tan color. But other than that, I'd say that they're pretty similar, as in, you could definitely make a leap of faith when it comes to believing that, these in the back here are supposed to represent either Emily's coaches or the old coaches. So I thought I would just show off this Ertl model because that's basically what I was going for there. So these coaches in the background, they serve a dual purpose. I just explained, why they're, supposed to look like the old coaches from the first season of the television series, but then they're also supposed to represent Emily's coaches, which are, current Thomas and Friends fans probably know a lot better than those old coaches. So I think, like I said earlier, I definitely think these are more representative and they definitely look more like Emily's coaches than the old coaches. But there's one little trick that I'll show at the end of this video that I think will help sell the fact that they could be the old coaches. So here we have the very first of three Emily's coaches, and the reason I had three made has to go back with the old coaches in the first season of the television series. In some scenes, I think most notably in the second episode of the series called Edward Helps Out, or I believe in the UK it's known as Edward and Gordon, Edward is seen pulling those old coaches, and he has three of them. So that's why I had three made, even though Emily, I believe she only has two coaches. In fact, I'm pretty positive she only has two coaches. So that's why there are three of them shown here. So when it came to creating this custom, I ended up sending Turtles and Thomas three basically unpainted, raw, bare Thomas Wooden Railway pieces of rolling stock that look just like this. And that's why, if you look underneath here, It just says Learning Curve Brands, and there's no name. It's a licensed product, but it's not from a specific character. Like, these weren't made from Annie and Clarabelle or something like that. And I actually got these unpainted coaches from a toy store that unfortunately was closing down pretty close to a year ago. I believe what ended up happening is they had a bunch of these unpainted coaches that they had for several years that they never ended up selling, or they never bothered to sell. But since the store was closing, they were basically liquidating everything. So they had these coaches, or these pieces of rolling stock, I should say, because you can make them into whatever you want. They had these unpainted pieces of rolling stock in this big shopping cart, and I believe they were only like $1 a piece. Which, in hindsight, I should have picked up more. I believe I only picked up 5 of them because I didn't know what I was going to do. That was before I was going to go on a custom craze like this one. But they had this style of rolling stock, which you could arguably say is just like an Annie and Clarabelle style. They also had the fuel tankers, and I believe they even had a few Sodor line cabooses. And those were from the Learning Curve era, I'd say around 2003 to 2005 or 2006, where they sold those unpainted pieces of rolling stock on purpose, and the idea was that kids could come along and paint them and make them look like whatever they wanted. So I ended up picking up 3 of them at that toy store. Like I said, I should have picked up more, but I ended up sending those unpainted coaches, or whatever you want to call them, to Turtles and Thomas, and I asked him, and I said, hey, can you create kind of a hybrid between Emily's coaches and the old coaches? Because for the purposes of my series, I probably won't use them as Emily's coaches too often, but when you take a look at a picture of the old coaches and Emily's coaches, they look remarkably similar. And I was thinking, it would be a wasted opportunity not to try to create something that doesn't look, more like a combination of the two. So these coaches really are meant to be, used in any particular order, I guess. Here's the unofficial second coach. As you can see, they're, remarkably similar. Again, no name on the bottom, but there's the licensing information. I'll mention it again. These were made by my friend Turtles and Thomas, who did an excellent job. I can't remember. He might have made these in the past for his own series or for somebody else. Off the top of my head, I can't remember that, though. But anyway, I think I have these coaches all backwards now. So just really quickly, I just mentioned that, there's 3 of them. They don't really need to be in any specific type of order. But this third coach, actually, I believe is meant to be in a specific type of order, because if you look at the back here, Turtles and Thomas was kind enough to paint this, I guess it's a lamp, but more accurately, it's like a brake lamp. So if an engine is pulling this train, and let's say they're going this way, you'd want to put this coach at the back of the train so that nobody runs into the back of the train, a la the Flying Kipper, for example. So these 2 coaches up here are interchangeable, and if I was just using them as Emily's coaches, I'd only need 2 of them because Emily only had 2 coaches. But this third coach here, I believe, is actually meant to be, the brake coach, and you can kind of tell that because of this nice lamp that's painted on there. And again, no name on the bottom. They all came, as the unpainted coaches, and Turtles and Thomas did a marvelous job of turning them into some very fine pieces of rolling stock. So I believe the last thing I'll do in this video, it'll probably anger Turtles and Thomas, but I mentioned this earlier, I believe there's a way to make these look more like Emily's coaches, or excuse me, the old coaches, whereas right now I'd say they look most like Emily's coaches rather than the old coaches. And it's just a very simple thing here. You see at the top, Turtles and Thomas was kind enough to include this piece of, looks like plastic at the top. And if you go and look at a picture of Emily's coaches, you'll realize there is this kind of risen section or a bridge or whatever you want to call it on top of the coaches, and that's a very important part of the detailing for Emily's coaches. However, if I wanted to make these look more like the old coaches, I could just simply take that piece off, and then hopefully you can start to see, minus the dried pieces of glue up there, hopefully you can start to see that they look more something like this, for example. So Turtles and Thomas probably won't be very happy that I took this off. Also, this is a fun little fact. I believe this is just Lego that he used. Very creative by Turtles and Thomas. I think it was just originally black, and he came along and painted it green. But the cool part is it actually just fits right back on there really nicely. If I were to ever use them as the old coaches, I'd probably come along, clean up that dry glue, and then if I never needed them for Emily's coaches, I could just take some putty and reattach it. So, sorry, Turtles and Thomas, I kind of accidentally on purpose broke your model here. You're a really nice model, but that's just something I'd probably do if I wanted to use them exclusively as the old coaches. So anyway, that is the awesome custom hybrid old coaches / Emily's coaches that Turtles and Thomas made for me. Like I've done with the other people who have made customs for me, be sure to check out Turtles and Thomas's channel, the always grumpy, never happy Turtles and Thomas that I'm sure a lot of people know about. The link to his channel is in both the description and the comments below, and be sure to give him some love because he definitely needs it, let's just say. All right, everybody, hope you have enjoyed this custom showcase here. I hope you guys are liking the series, and I guess I'll see you on the next video.